Welcome to Theology with Coffee. I'm Kelsan Wolverton.
I'm Taylor Wood, and this is where we have casual conversations about deep biblical truth.
If you enjoy this content, hit the like button.
If you really enjoy it, subscribe and tell your friends where they can find us.
So grab your Bible, something to write with, a cup of coffee, and let's include a friend too, because it's time to dive into the Word. Hello and welcome back. Wow, it's been forever since we've gotten back into Revelation. It feels like years, but it's been over 6 months probably, right?
Well, our apologies to our faithful listeners.
Yeah.
I think we did an episode or two back in the fall.
But, right after the summer.
It's been a while since we've had a consistent schedule.
Yeah.
So we're trying something new.
Right.
We'll see if it works. But hopefully we'll be having several episodes published fairly regularly. And of course, if you're listening to this several years down the line on YouTube, or you find us later, for you, it's going to be like we never missed a day because they're all uploaded.
Absolutely. Because I know a lot of you are like, what is happening? We're at the end of Revelation. And I'm like, yes, I know. There's so much to still discuss.
That's right.
Right. And then eventually we'll do a new book. And maybe we'll send out a poll or something asking what you think we should do next. Mm-hmm. We recommend Old Testament because we do Old Testament, New Testament. We go back and forth. Yeah.
We are winding down on Revelation. We're actually nearing the end here. Mm-hmm. We are in danger of stumbling and falling right at the finish line. We're not going to. We're going to get to that finish line. But we are kind of coming towards the end of the book. And in fact, we're really in the penultimate major section of this book. We're in this section of the book of Revelation that deals with these various different pictures of the end times.
Yeah.
And here in chapter 17, we're dealing with this theme of the fall of Babylon. Mm-hmm. We've already dealt with one image from chapter 17, and in this episode, we're going to be dealing with the another image.
Right.
So if you are interested in this is part 2 of chapter 17. In part 1, we dealt with the image of the harlot in scarlet. And so if you have not listened to that one, I recommend going back and listening to that episode. And in this one, we're going to focus more on this character of the beast, and in particular, the kings of the beast, and sort of talk about this imagery here in chapter 17. Just as a quick reminder, who's our author of the book of John? Mm-hmm. What is the date and what is the circumstances that we're talking about?
Yeah, so the author of this book is John the disciple, who has been exiled on the land of Patmos and has seen this vision. Ultimately, the purpose of this is to encourage readers who are going through persecution that they will be able to conquer, and that ones who continue are faithful in God's family and continue to persevere and endure, they will have the strength of thousands because of God being on their side.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to emphasize with that, because that's going to be relevant in what we're going to be talking about in chapter 17, as well as what will come up in chapter 18. And these all kind of belong to the same subsection here.
Yeah.
But Paul is writing to Christians living in the Roman Empire who often face pressures from the Roman Empire to compromise on their faith, their ethics, their values in order to participate in regular economic commerce in the Roman Empire. And so there was this, not only was there this active persecution that believers faced, but there was this passive coercion of do what Rome tells you to do, or your business is going to suffer, or you're not going to have prosperity.
Yeah,
right?
Well, we saw that with the churches in Revelation chapter 1 through 3, mm-hmm. right? About how some were prosperous because of following that economicness of the Roman Empire, or allowing certain gods to be in the frontal of their lives. And so, absolutely, to keep the land itself from thriving, to either do that or to not do that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All of this is kind of in a section here in the book of Revelation, chapter 17 through 19, that we classified as the fall of Babylon.
Yeah.
This whole section is about the fall of Babylon. Now, Babylon itself, as with everything in Revelation, there's many different views on what John is talking about with Babylon. Mm-hmm. But sort of the view that we settled on here at Theology with Coffee is that Babylon has sort of three different layers of meaning, three different things that John wants you thinking about when he talks about when he uses this image of Babylon. First one is historical Babylon,
Right.
the great enemy of Israel in the Old Testament, you could say, is Babylon. What's the significance of Old Testament Babylon, the Babylon that sort of shows up in the Old Testament text, the immediate referent that John has for us whenever he's talking about Babylon?
Yeah, so when he's thinking about that, he goes back to actually several of the prophets, like in Isaiah as well as Ezekiel, and pretty much this Babylon that comes to literally utterly destroy Israel, right? It destroys the temple. They take most of the people and bring them as captives, as slaves inside Babylon. And with King Nebuchadnezzar, with other kings that are happening in that, they take over that what was Israel was designed. But because of the judgment that was put on there, yes, there is judgment for Israel, but as we can see years down the line, that what we would like to call the two sides of the same coins. There's salvation as well as judgment. And right now we're seeing the judgment, and then we're going to see the salvation plan for the ones who continue to conquer the Lamb, as it says in Revelation chapter 17 in verses 19 and 20.
Yeah. So not only does the empire of Babylon represent this great threat to Israel in the Old Testament, Babylon also, in the visions of Daniel, Babylon represents the wealthiest, most luxuriant, most powerful human empire that has ever existed.
Yeah.
So in Daniel's vision of the world empires, Babylon is the head of gold. And every empire that comes after Babylon, including Rome of John's day, would be, while perhaps they may have superior military strength, are less valuable, are less luxurious as that of the empire of Babylon. So Babylon really represents not only this great threat to Israel, this great rebel against God, but also sort of the greatest possible example of human achievement in governmental organization is the empire of Babylon. That's not the only image that John wants you to be thinking about, though. John's not writing this text to Romans to warn them about a Babylon that existed several hundred years before the text of Revelation is written. A second layer of meaning is the modern day, the contemporaneous empire of Rome.
Yeah.
This would have been the most immediate threat that the Christians, the seven churches that this letter is addressed to, that the Christians would have faced. So how does Rome then fit into this mold of the empire of Babylon? Or why is John referring to Rome as Babylon in this passage?
Because at the time, Rome was just not only powerful economically and socially and politically, but also the fact, too, that especially like emperors like Nero, Domitian, they would persecute, and we can see that these are that is during this time of Revelation of Christians being persecuted for their faith, to the point where they're going to be as like people going to the gladiator games to watch them die to their death, to being torched like fire, to all this stuff. And so for the Hellenistic Christians that John is specifically saying to this audience, it wouldn't just be in specifically Rome and all, but all over Roman Empire, because of how Rome conquered Greece and Greece, so on and so forth. And so we see not only those things of power, but also just the persecution of rise. Just like with Babylon, we see that even in Rome too.
Now, many scholars, when I've been studying the book of Revelation, they sort of stop at that point. They think Babylon just equals Rome.
Right.
However, I think, Kelsan, both you and I also view this Babylon as having a third layer of meaning, which is that, and probably you could say this is the ultimate layer of meaning, which is this future world empire, which will be like Rome before it, but will also be like Babylon before that, and will represent this great rebellious force against God, and really this final rebellious force against God that represents. And so you actually have this very poetic past, present, and future element of Babylon. When John is talking about Babylon, he's talking about God's the both the past.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about the present,
Yeah.
but he's also talking about this future empire that will be like that which has come before, but will have this will probably be even more powerful. And he is warning not just the readers of his time, but every generation of believers to keep an eye out for the Babylon of the beast that represents Satan's ultimate act of rebellion against God on this earth. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And just to even like that word Babylon, it's actually used more than Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, in Scripture. And I didn't find this out until recently. In the Bible, at least 260 times is Babylon mentioned, as past, as present, or on this specific time, a third layer with John, the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And since you mentioned Jerusalem and our listeners of previous episodes, they'll know this. But if this is the first episode you're listening to, we do not believe that the Babylon here refers to Jerusalem, or when the great city is destroyed earlier in the book of Revelation, I believe in chapter 16.
Yeah.
We do not believe that the great city there refers to Jerusalem. We believe that that city refers to Babylon as well.
Yeah.
In this particular case. So with that, we can kind of jump back into chapter 17. Again, we've already talked about the image of the great prostitute. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to that one. For us, that was months ago. For you, that is the mere push of a button as to the previous video. Why don't, did we talk about who's going to read?
No.
Okay. Kelsan, why don't you read chapter 17?
Sure. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery: Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman, drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is in an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw, where the prostitute is seated, are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth."
Okay. So, as I said, we already kind of discussed the great prostitute. And here what we want to focus on is we want to focus on the beast, and in particular, these horns and heads of the beast that are described as kings. Now, the first verse that really jumps out to me in the description of the beast is we're told that she sits on a scarlet beast, which is kind of a reworking of Genesis 12 and Genesis 13, where in that one we have a red dragon, and we have the beast of the sea that the dragon calls forth in Revelation chapter 13.
Yeah.
So we have this word red. And the red, the scarlet, this imagery is tying us back to the red dragon of Revelation 12, who we know is Satan. So we automatically know that this is a beast that is empowered by Satan. He is sort of Satan's representative on this earth. Something else to remember, and this comes from Daniel, beast can be an individual, but it can also be a kingdom.
Right.
And you're going to actually see John does both of those things in this chapter.
Yeah.
The beast is both a kingdom, but the beast is also a king of the kingdom. The beast is full of blasphemous names. That's kind of the first image that I really wanted to pick up on here, is the image of the blasphemous names that the beast is covered with.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that idea of the blasphemous names?
Oh, absolutely. So I think it kind of ties back even to Revelation chapter 1-3 about the gods of Zeus, the gods, of Aphrodite, the god, even Domitian and Nero, they gave their names as Lord of Lords, King of Kings, the Savior, the all powerful. And here we have the beast doing the same thing, of him saying, I am the Lord of Lords. I am the Alpha Omega. I am the Savior. It's like the opposite of what Jesus calls himself, what we call Jesus, and we'll see that here, that he is the Lord of Lords, that he is the King of Kings. And this beast is making itself be an opposite of saying that I am those names. And I think John is tying that back to Revelation chapter 13 with some of that blasphemous names, but also, as we discussed, even with the churches and with those gods and even with the emperors, they're saying that I am the one who will save the nation. And the beast is saying, I'm doing the same, when ultimately it's the Lamb who will do that.
One of the first things that comes to my mind when I hear about these blasphemous names are the rebel gods of Babel, right? These are the sons of God who, after the events of Babel, turn their backs on God and they're judged. Their judgment is written about in Psalm chapter 82. These are the fallen or the rebel gods or the rebel angels that have led the nations astray. They are the powers and principalities that Paul talks about in the book of Ephesians. And oftentimes these groups are in conflict with one another. These beings are vying for power over humans. And so oftentimes they are fighting with each other as much as they're fighting against the kingdom of God. But there's something about this beast that now he holds sway, he holds dominion over all of these blasphemous names. And that is because he belongs to the one blasphemous name, the Red Dragon. And so whereas all the other kingdoms are sort of lesser representatives of rebellion, here you have the one true kingdom, and now it is no mere false god who sets himself up as the king of this kingdom, but it is Satan himself. He has declared this kingdom on his own. And so I do think we have, pointing here to a degree, is this one world government, this government that is now dominating all other powers, both human and divine, here on this earth for authority. And so it is the beast that contains all of the blasphemous names, not just one blasphemous name. And then we get this reference that he has 7 heads and 10 horns. And again, this is a callback to Revelation 13, to the beast. So this is telling us that this is the same beast of Revelation 13. The beast in Revelation 13 and the beast in Revelation 17, it is both the empire of the Antichrist, but it also is the Antichrist himself. It is both of those things. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. I want to move on to verse 8 next. Do you have anything between verse 3 and verse 8 that you want to talk about in regards to the beast and the kings?
No, I think the only thing in verse 8 that I just find really fascinating is John says it several times. The beast that you saw was, is not, isn't about. And I just thought about, okay, we talked about even in the beginning of Revelation, Jesus who was, who is, and who is to come. And here is a play on words of John doing the same thing with the beast. And then I also thought it was really interesting, in the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we already have the ones whose life is not in the book of life, the Lamb of God, the family of God. They themselves will be astonished greatly as they see this beast from the very foundations of the world. And I thought that was really poetic and very very interesting for John to put that.
Mm-hmm. Also there in verse 8, we see that the beast is about to rise from the bottomless pit.
Mm-hmm.
The bottomless pit, in the Greek, this would be the Greek word abyssos.
Yeah.
And in the Hebrew, this would be Sheol. This, of course, if you're familiar with sort of Hebrew cosmology, biblical cosmology, this is the realm of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the dead spirits live. This is another reference, and this is one of many references that we've gotten in Revelation. Remember that the beast in chapter 13 has a fatal wound.
Yep.
It has a wound that is healed. It carries about the scar. Later on, the people worship the beast who had died and come back. Well, here we have another cryptic image or cryptic reference to the fact that this beast has been destroyed, and yet he has come back. Now, a way that a lot of traditional prophecy teaching has discussed this is they've discussed this in terms of the beast representing a reconstituted Roman Empire. And so the reason why we get this language of the beast coming up from the bottomless pit, the reason why we get this fatal wound that it is healed from, is that you get this idea of the Rome that is not, but now this power of Rome has returned.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that per se, and I'd be interested to see if you have any thoughts on that position. But I think there could be more to it than just a kingdom that disappeared and has come back.
Right.
So just on that theory, that kind of collectivized version of a reconstituted Roman Empire, do you have any thoughts?
No, I think honestly, it could really, I don't know if it would be Rome specifically, but it might have ideas, right, of just like Rome. I would think of Greece, Babylon.
It could just as well be a reconstituted Babylonian empire.
Yes, exactly,
right?
which we've already talked about, that it could be this future empire that we don't even know, right?
And in fact, so a lot of prophecy teachers, especially coming out of, say, the 50s and 60s, they always view the empire of the beast as being European.
Right.
And they would usually view the Antichrist as being some sort of Russian or coming out of
China?
Western Europe.
Yeah.
A lot of times the Vatican and the Catholic Church is wrapped in that. And again, I'm not here to necessarily disagree with that.
Mesopotamia, where the Garden of Eden was.
Well, so yeah, there's that European view. But to your point, it could just as easily be a different geographical area.
Right.
Other prophecy teachers who view Islam as being a part of the empire of the Antichrist, which is possible, they would say, well, this isn't talking about the center of Roman power. This is actually talking about the center of Babylonian empire, which would be much farther east. That would be in modern day Iraq, would have been where the center of the Babylonian power would be. A reconstituted Persian empire would be farther east from that in Iran. So while I think there's some merit to the idea that we have this resurrected empire, it doesn't have to be a resurrected Rome.
Right.
And I think you're going too far if you are picking which of these geographical areas you think that this empire is going to come from.
Which mostly that's talked about. Yeah. I would agree.
Beyond that, though, there is no reason why we should not think of this as a reconstituted individual. And so you get other theories. In fact, famously, the Left Behind series has their version of the Antichrist actually gets shot and comes back from the dead. And they get that again from passages like this, passages that talk about the fatal wound, and then he has this fatal wound, and people worship him because he should be dead. Passages like this that talk about him coming up from Sheol.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I read a book that was kind of the end times, and it was somebody who was on the European UA, who was part of the Vatican, who gets shot and comes back into play. Yeah.
So that is actually closer, even though I don't agree with that view. I don't think that what John is saying is that the Antichrist, there's going to be an assassination attempt on the Antichrist and he's going to come back. what I do think that that's closer in the sense that I do think that there is going to be a quasi-human divine being who was dead and has come back from the dead. And I'll talk about that more in a bit. But I actually think this view of an individual is closer to what John is talking about here, as opposed to this view of a reconstituted Roman Empire or Empire of the East or something along those lines. Right? Mm-hmm. So he comes up from the realm of the dead. Yeah. And when the beast is revealed, he's revealed as someone who comes from the dead, and people are going to recognize this. Yes. They're going to recognize the fact that this is a sort of a false version of Jesus' resurrection. Yeah. This is a sick mimicry by Satan of what Jesus does with his resurrection, where Satan is going to take a being who had died and bring that being back. And perhaps this is going to happen with human agents, with some sort of sorcery. Perhaps the Nephilim are involved. We're not exactly sure. But this is going to be some sick mimicry of the resurrection that is going to bring about the reign of the Antichrist, is, I believe, what's going on here. Oh, yeah. But we're told the dwellers on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. So we see that line being echoed once again, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So part of what is going to lead to this worldwide cult following of this beast is going to be the fact that he is a being that is brought back from the dead. This is another reason why I think that, yes, John is talking about an empire, but he's also talking about a person. Yeah. Because I don't think the vast majority of people, if you get a second Roman Empire or a second Persian Empire or Babylonian Empire, you're not going to have this worldwide marveling taking place. If someone that people know is dead comes back from the dead.
Right. Especially somebody who was terrible and evil, right? Yes. And has been known in history and comes back. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if this is accompanied, as we see in Revelation 14, with these miraculous signs, then these forms of kind of techno magic that the Antichrist is going to have access to, then I do think that will produce massive amounts of people marveling and worshiping the beast, this Antichrist figure in that kind of a scenario, right? Right. So John kind of pauses in chapter 9. He says, what I'm about to tell you is going to be really weird, and you're going to have to think really hard about it. Because he said, this calls for a mind with wisdom. So he's basically telling you this is a riddle. Yeah. And with that, I think Kelsan and I would both acknowledge we're being very humble here. We're not saying that we have all the answers. No. We're going to be doing some speculation. Yeah. But we're going to be trying to solve the riddle that John is about to give us. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. We talked about that with the scarlet harlot. But verse 10, there are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. So Kelsan, so the 7 heads are 7 kings, and it talks about how 5 of these 7 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not come, and there's an 8th one who's of the 7. What do you make of this? How do you make sense of this little riddle that John includes here in this passage?
Absolutely. So I would say 5 of whom have fallen would mean 5 kings who used to reign and have power and dominion over an empire or the earth, to the next one who is ruling now, who thinks who has that power, and then you have one that has yet to come. It would sound like, as we've already talked about from the bottomless pit and destruction, the dwellers, as someone who has died and yet is reincarnated once again. And that 8th goes with Satan, with the Antichrist being the 7th.
And when you say is now, you're talking about from John's perspective.
Yeah, John's perspective. Yes.
So in John's day.
In John's day.
60 AD or 90 AD, whichever date you go with. But in either case, from contemporaneous with John You have 5 who are in John's past.
Right.
One who is in John's present.
Mm-hmm.
2 that are in John's future. And then that final one is of the previous 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The 8th is of the 7.
Okay.
Yeah. What are some of the interpretations that we run into with this?
I think the very first one, and it seems to be the most popular, is that these are kings from the Roman Empire specifically. I don't have a full list, but people like Nero is one, Domitian, was Caligula considered one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the various lists, I'll go through 3 of the options there. One option starts with Julius Caesar and goes through Nero,
right?
Representing 6, and that would represent the dynasty of Julius Caesar, because all of Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero were all in the family of Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Now, after Nero, the dynasty changes hands. You have a new family.
Right.
But some people would start with Augustus, who is technically the first emperor of Rome. Julius Caesar was never an emperor of Rome. Augustus is actually the first emperor of Rome, and then they would take it through Emperor Galba, who is in AD 68 and 69. Another theory starts with Caligula. And the reason why people would start with Caligula is firmly in the church age at that point. Caligula would have been after the death of Jesus Christ. He begins reigning in 37 AD. And that's really when the first elements of persecution of the church begin by the Roman Empire. And it would go through Domitian in 96 AD, who is likely the emperor at the time that John is writing.
Right, that was our conclusion.
Yeah,
for that.
If you date Revelation into the 90s, which we tend to, although sometimes I go back and forth whether I think it's 90s or 60s.
Yes,
But if you date Revelation into the 90s, then it would be Domitian. Either way, you can classify all these views as the Roman view.
Right.
And the 7 kings that John is talking about here are 7 Roman emperors.
Yeah.
What neither one of us agree with this view.
Right.
So why would you critique this? Why are we disagreeing with what the vast majority of evangelical scholars would take?
Well, I think first off, one of those reasons would be the fact that we don't think this is present Rome, right? With Babylon, we think of this as future empire, where a lot of people would say this Babylon is Rome. So then they would associate that with 7 kings being of the 7 Roman kings. I think there's some others of the fact of with some of those kings, some of those were horrible, and maybe they were all horrible, but some were not as completely terrible compared to people in the past who were kings of other emperors and domains that were even worse than what some of those Roman empires are. And then there's
also the point that some of these emperors really have very little to almost nothing to do with either the land of promise or the Christian church.
That's true too.
When you talk about people like Augustus and Tiberius, Tiberius is the emperor when Jesus is crucified, but Tiberius had no concerns or no cares with what was happening in Judea at that time. Augustus and Tiberius have very little to do with, let's say, the salvation history that is taking place.
Yeah.
Julius Caesar is another example of that. Julius Caesar had almost nothing to do with what is happening in Israel, in Jerusalem, prior to, say around 30 BC.
Yeah.
Julius Caesar is a important figure, but he is playing no part in the biblical narrative of sort of this drama between good and evil.
Yeah. So I think those are some critiques I would say about the Roman kings. Yeah.
I agree with that. I agree with you. I do not agree with what I describe as the Roman-centric view of these 7 kings.
Right.
I don't think it makes sense to identify these as a series of kings at or around the same time that John is living.
Right.
Now, other people will take this and they will view this as purely futuristic. They will say that these 7 kings that the reference there is to 7 kings who will live in the future, leading up to the future empire of the Antichrist.
Right.
Again, I have an issue with that because John specifically says 5 are fallen.
Right.
And 1 is.
Mm-hmm.
And so he seems to be talking about the 5 who exist from his point of view, from his time in history.
Yeah.
There are 5 of these 7 kings who have already existed. So how do you make sense of this?
Well, as we've kind of already seen with John, you see how he goes a lot back to the Old Testament in the past, as well as a little bit of the present and as well as the future. And so it makes sense too to see that with the 5 that have fallen, that these are past kings, at the same time that there is one now, specifically with this audience, and that there could be this futuristic king that could happen in the future that he himself, you know what I mean, wasn't even exactly sure of. But I think kind of going back to even what you said, and we'll discuss that this king that has yet to come is going to be this quasi, you know what I mean, this Nephilim / human person that is going to be beyond what the human comprehension is going to even imagine.
So when we think of these kings, we don't have to think of them as successive kings in one specific empire.
No.
But instead, these kings could be types of the Antichrist. They could be Antichrist candidates.
Right.
That each of them, in the course of salvation history, fulfills this sort of character profile of who the final Antichrist will be. And the 8th king, who comes from the 7, will really represent the worst quality of all of these other 7s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is the view. I think that I agree with you. And that's the view that we're kind of taking here at Theology with Coffee. Peter Goodgame, in his book, The Second Coming of the Antichrist, he proposes a view very similar to this. Mm-hmm. His view is neither futuristic nor is it a contemporaneous view of the Roman emperors. Instead, he takes this king list and he seeks to identify these various kings with various powers that are influential in the history of God's people, in the salvation history of God's people. The figures that he identifies going backwards, the 7th one, so this would be the one, the other has not yet come. Mm-hmm. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while.
Yeah.
He identifies this figure with Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
And so he believes Hitler was the last of these 7 kings who must arise before the coming of the beast, the 8th king. And that Adolf Hitler, not only his role as sort of this cultic, evil, demonic, violent world leader, but also the role that this plays in the reestablishment of the nation of Israel in 1948.
Yeah.
That all of this is sort of the final pieces clicking into place before the final beastly king arises. Moving backwards, he would identify the 6th king. So this is the one who is. He would identify this as either Nero or Domitian, right? Yeah. So whichever one of those views, if you take Revelation as being written during the reign of Nero, then you would take Nero as that king. If you believe it was written in the 90s during the reign of Domitian, then you would take Domitian as that 6th king.
Yeah.
His 5th, and then working backwards from there, so the 5 fallen ones, he would say Antiochus IV.
Yeah.
Before him, the king of Tyre from Ezekiel chapter 28.
Right.
And he identifies this king of Tyre with Ithobal II, the king of Tyre. Moving back from there, Sennacherib, who sacks the northern kingdom and besieges Jerusalem during the reign of Hezekiah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Moving back farther from that, the Pharaoh of the book of Exodus. And finally, the first Antichrist candidate that he proposes is Nimrod from the book of Genesis. Mm-hmm. And so that's his list of those kings. I think it's a solid list. It has a lot of speculation in it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to talk about the ones that I agree with versus the ones that I'm not quite as sold on.
Yeah.
But this is kind of his view, and I think this is the view that we would adopt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that we're not looking towards one particular kingdom, one particular country, but we're actually looking at the biblical literature, and we're saying, who are the 6 candidates that John, from his biblical reading, would say, hey, this is the profile of the beast.
Yeah.
This is the profile of the Antichrist that you should be looking for, that this great final Antichrist is going to embody all of these wicked, evil ideals, right? Does that? Yeah. So that's kind of our view. What do you think? What do you think of the strengths of that? What do you think of the weaknesses of that? Do you have anyone you would throw on that list, or anyone that you're surprised by? I mean, let's just kind of speculate for a little bit.
Speculate. Well, I definitely can see Nimrod, just because Nimrod, it becomes this big civilization that we see in Genesis, in chapter 11, especially with the Tower of Babel, and kind of this anti little g god versus a human, you know what I mean, and its power. And so how, like I said, even during that time, he ruled all things until the Lord, well, pretty much dispersed all of them with different languages and different things, that they couldn't be able to make this tower to be close, to get this secret knowledge that was what they were hoping to get, to be this ultimate God. And so I would agree with that one
And Nimrod is a Nephilim.
Yep, he is.
So he is one of the, if you go back and read Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4,
yep,
he is one of these human angelic being hybrids who is brings about the judgment of the flood,
right?
But is very wicked and is sort of, he is a part of this line created to challenge God's rule over this earth. And you get that again from Genesis chapter 6. You also get that from the book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Not only that, Nimrod in the book of Genesis, he is responsible for founding both the empires of Babylon and Assyria.
Yeah.
And so it is his line, it is his kingdom that really becomes responsible for the great villains of the Old Testament text. And his father, Cush, comes out of Egypt. And so he's tied with really the three great villains of the Old Testament: Egypt, Babylon, and Assyria.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's I think is very, very interesting in making the case for Nimrod.
Yeah.
Right? Any other thoughts to those?
I thought Pharaoh, like, it makes sense with Pharaoh, but I haven't heard that one specifically on a list before. But it makes sense with his, the fact of trying to wipe out, right? Because the Hebrews that we see in Exodus continue to grow, continue to multiply. He's threatened that they'll overthrow him and his throne, so much so that he tells the midwives to completely kill the male born that are younger, right, than 3 years old. But yet they don't. And they continue to multiply until, well, as we see with the story of Moses, and that's where God redeems his people after 400 years of slavery. And how Pharaoh himself, I guess, hardens his heart to the point, even with all the plagues, even with all those things, he continued to have this selfishness and this pride to go after God's people.
You also have with Pharaoh the fact that Nimrod is a Nephilim. He is a son of the gods, so to speak. Pharaoh claims to be a son of the god. And the pharaohs were representations of false gods here on this earth.
Yeah.
Pharaoh employs magic workers.
Yes.
Right? Just like with the beast of the sea, there is the beast of the earth who is this false prophet, this false miracle worker. And you read the book of Revelation, how many similarities are there between Revelation and Exodus?
To Exodus. Quite a few.
And the great villain of the book of Exodus is the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And so I think there's that element as well. Any others that you kind of
What was the third one that you said?
Third one is Sennacherib.
Yeah, I could see that, especially with it being the destruction of, first off, with Israel. Because Sennacherib, we see that actually several times in First Kings, of wanting to come and destroy. Specifically also with during the time of King Hezekiah, but that's where the Lord brings the Lord of the angel armies to defeat Sennacherib and his hundreds of thousands with just in the middle of the night without Hezekiah having to pick up its sword.
Yeah.
But also the Ninevites were just very, very terrible individuals. They had the most gruesome tortures, gruesome deaths. And, when you study Jonah, and Jonah's like, I don't want to go there. It kind of makes sense because I'm like, yeah, Jonah, I probably wouldn't have wanted to do that either because they were just hungry, thirsty individuals who wanted power. And so I could see Sennacherib.
And Sennacherib is Nimrod's heir in many ways.
Exactly. There was that too.
Because even though the Assyrians that Sennacherib rules over are a different people group than the Assyria that Nimrod founds, nevertheless, this is the same geographical area that would be ruled by the same demonic forces.
Yeah.
And so the empire of Assyria is a rebuilding of Nimrod's empire, and Sennacherib is the greatest and most prominent of the kings who comes out of that Neo-Assyrian empire that ultimately marches upon the gates of Jerusalem and opposes one of our messianic kings. Hezekiah. So you have this Messiah and anti-Messiah drama that happens between Hezekiah and Sennacherib in the books of Second Kings, Second Chronicles, and Isaiah. The stories relate in all three of those. Okay. Any others that you thought were interesting?
I don't know Tyre as much. I know that, and we'll see John goes back to a lot, especially in Ezekiel chapter 27, and we're going to see that in Revelation chapter 18. But I don't know him as an actual emperor. So maybe you can give us a little bit of a Cliff Note summary of King Tyre.
No, I'm in the same shoes.
You're in the same shoes. Okay.
In my opinion, that's probably the weakest.
I would agree.
Good Games candidates. One of the weaker ones of his candidates. Ezekiel 28, to me, I've always viewed that as a passage that, yes, it is condemning the king of Tyre, but ultimately this is a passage that is speaking about the fall of the dragon, the fall of the serpent, Satan himself. And so that's the primary referent of that passage there in Ezekiel chapter 28. Just like in Isaiah 14, which is a parallel to Ezekiel 28, that is about the king of Babylon, and yet it is about the serpent, is about Satan, Isaiah chapter 14. And he doesn't include any kings of Babylon on his list that he has here. So,
and then Antonius Epiphanes.
Antiochus.
Absolutely that one, because we've talked about it before. I even talked about it when I talked about Hanukkah, but this would be during the time of the interbiblical period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, of this pretty much governor emperor who demolishes the temple by bringing in a pig and sacrificing it in the Holy of Holies, causing so much strife and hatred towards the Israelites that where the Maccabees revolt and claim back the land of Israel for just a little while until they're conquered. But that definitely plays, I feel like, into play as him being an emperor.
Okay.
And then, well, I could see Hitler being a thing because, well, Hitler was not a very great person. And all the history that specifically played. And going back to even what you said, even with the land of Israel at that time trying to claim its independence once again.
Yeah. I want to be careful with the Hitler one in particular.
I would agree.
Because of recency bias.
Yeah.
Right? It's so easy for us to look back at recent history and just pick out scoundrels. Of course, the 20th century has no shortage of scoundrels. You can talk about Stalin. You can talk about Lenin. You can talk about even some really despicable people in the West who have existed in the 19th and 20th century.
Yeah.
And so I could see it.
Right. I could see it, but I wouldn't, out of that list, you're like you said, it's probably the weak link as well. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, whenever I think about this list, I think if we're thinking historically, if we're having this system in which we say, okay, who are candidates for the Antichrist, for these 5 Antichrists who lived before the time of John? Well, automatically, some of these I think are very strong candidates. Nimrod, we'll talk about Nimrod again here in a bit. Pharaoh, I think, is a very strong candidate for the reasons that we've already talked about. Antiochus IV, to me, that's a non that is an absolute.
Yeah, absolute. Right.
If you read the book of Daniel, Antiochus, who is the little horn, who is the king of the north, he is the prime example of who the Antichrist will be in the book of Daniel. Yeah. So, reading the book of Daniel, when you're thinking, well, who will the Antichrist be like? Daniel says he's like Antiochus the Fourth.
Mm-hmm.
And so Antiochus there is a non-starter. Another one to me, or sorry, not a non-starter, but non-controversial. Another one to me that I think is just an obvious pick is Nero.
Right.
For a lot of reasons we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm of two minds on this because we date the book of Revelation to the 90s.
Yes.
And yet a 60s date of the book of Revelation would actually fit a lot better with this, because you would have Nero being the one who is.
Yeah.
And you have John talking about this great and monstrous persecutor of the church, hater of Christians, vile person who, like Pharaoh, believed himself to be a son of the gods.
Yeah.
Nero is really one of the great madmen of history. And so Nero fits very, very well in there. But I think it's highly likely that Revelation is written in the 90s, not in the 60s. And so I have a little bit of trouble with that. Other candidates who could fit in that kind of the past five. Herod is conspicuously
I was going to say,
absent. Herod the Great.
Herod the Great.
I think Herod the Great really fits a lot of the Antichrist themes. He is a false ruler over the city of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He comes from the rebellious, wicked line of Edom. He is a direct opposer of the Messiah. Revelation 12, which I take to be a Christmas passage.
Yeah.
He is the agent that Satan uses to destroy the Messiah in Revelation chapter 12.
And specifically kind of foreshadowing too of what happened with Egypt, with the boys.
He's an echo of Pharaoh.
He's an echo of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Herod the Great is another strong candidate for the Antichrist that didn't make Good Game's list,
right,
but would probably make my list.
I can see that.
As I was kind of filling out these five kings of the past.
Mm-hmm.
Sennacherib makes a lot of sense for some of the reasons we already talked about, especially him being the heir of the empire of Nimrod
yeah.
In that case. And another one who doesn't get mentioned by Good Game here, but I think would be another good candidate for one of these kings, would be Emperor Titus. So Titus, he does not rule for very long.
Okay.
His emperorship over Rome, I believe, is only 3 years before he is overthrown and his line is ended, and then a new dynasty is begun in Rome. But what makes Titus stand out is he is not emperor, but he is commander of the Roman armies who march into Jerusalem and destroy the temple in 69 AD. So if John is reflecting back upon the destruction of the temple, or even if John is writing in the 60s and he's looking forward to it, this Roman general who destroys the temple erects a statue of Zeus, much like Antiochus IV in Jerusalem, does these terrible things where the temple is. Titus would be this evil figure. And in fact, many of the church fathers and many of the theologians have viewed in Titus and in the destruction of the temple this sort of end times model playing out, with Titus playing the part that Antiochus IV, that the Antichrist plays in other passages. Why do I think that's especially interesting? What does he say about the sixth king? He says, the fifth king. No, the sixth one. He says, no, the seventh. I'm getting confused. Okay. He says, the other has not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. And again, Titus's reign as emperor is only about 2 years. But he is the general who destroys Jerusalem. So is it possible that John, writing at a time either before or after the destruction of the temple, is talking about the future reign of Titus, in which Titus is only going to reign for a little while, even though he does this monstrous destruction of Jerusalem? There's some elegance to that theory that I kind of like. That does almost demand, though, that Revelation be written in the 60s, not the 90s.
Right.
And again, I don't believe it is. So that's why I said I'm of two minds here. I'm divided on that, because there's some things that almost make more sense if John is writing from the context of Nero's reign.
Right.
Because Titus would be after Nero.
Right.
But Titus is before Domitian. So it's a difficult difficult one. Here's what it comes down to, though. We've done enough speculation.
We've done a lot, yeah.
Whoever we think these kings are,
yep.
and we think that there's some really strong candidates, and then we have some question marks. They lead up to this eighth, who is of the seven.
Yes.
Which means, and the eighth one is the beast.
Right.
He is the Antichrist. He is the final ruler of Satan's last principality, Satan's last dominion on earth.
Mm-hmm.
The empire that will oppose the second coming of Christ is ruled by this eighth king. And John makes this cryptic statement that the eighth is of the seven.
Yeah.
Now let's start putting these pieces together. John has already told us that the beast comes up from Sheol. He is someone who is slain and was raised again.
Yeah.
He has already told us that he has a fatal wound, and he is brought back from this fatal wound, and that people will worship him because he is this fallen person who has experienced this dark mimicry of the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is the one who was and is and always will be. The Antichrist is the one who was, is not. And will be.
Yeah.
So not only is he this sick mimicry of the Son of God, he is the son of Satan, and he is a mimicry of the Son of God, but he also has this element of there is a period of time in which he is not.
Mm-hmm.
What if, and this is mine and Kelsan's view, by the way, what if this Antichrist is one of these seven historical kings who has been resurrected from the dead?
Yeah.
What do you think of that view?
I think, when you first brought it up a while back, I forget where it was that we talked about it in one of the Revelations. We just mentioned just a little bit, but I remember,
it was probably Revelation 13.
Maybe it was. Yeah. I remember being like, that makes sense. And as I have studied and researched more, it honestly makes more and more sense as we go through Revelation, as well as what we've seen, you know what I mean, of this figure that is in opposition, like you said, like from the Son of God, you know what I mean? How Jesus is, who was, who is to come, or is now here, from who is not, who will be and will come forth, of somebody who will mimic who God is, this resurrection being that used to be this king that did have an empire that ruled over. And that's why those names, those dwellers whose names are not in the book of life in the family of, of God, will marvel at that sight, because they'll be like, because at this point in time, Jesus is the only one who's been raised from the dead. That's what makes him so powerful. And yet we have this false God who says, well, I am he, and will do something in that same similarity. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what would be this kind of miraculous event that could get every religion on this earth worshiping someone as a false Messiah? Well, coming back from the dead.
Yeah.
And having these sort of, again, techno-magic abilities that humanity has never seen, or perhaps has not seen since before the flood, would be something that would constitute a sort of miraculous event that could unify the entire world under a single ruler. Right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And we believe that the best candidate for this would, in fact, be the first Antichrist, Nimrod himself.
Correct.
So Nimrod, this Nephilim, who is judged by God, his empire is destroyed. He is forced, and his spirit probably roams as an unclean Nephilim demonic spirit, but his body is cast to Sheol and destroyed. That is brought back. And so what we have is a second coming of Nimrod.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word resurrection, because I think the resurrection is something unique to Jesus Christ and to the people of Christ.
Yeah.
But a revivification, if you will, of this ancient evil fallen king who comes to reclaim. He was the first. The first world empire was Nimrod's empire.
Yeah.
And he comes to reclaim that empire under this new one world government in this case.
Yeah.
Is it speculation? Yeah,
absolutely.
It's speculation. Right?
Yeah.
And this is not something that we certainly think should divide brothers and sisters.
Oh, no.
But In my mind, this creates a very strong narrative that ties together not only John's biblical view of the past, what the people of John's day are going through, but also
Yeah.
his concern for future generations of the church being ready for this eighth who is of the seven. Right?
Right.
So other details we get here is we find out that there are 10 kings. These 10 kings are future kings who are going to form a confederacy to give their kingdoms over to this eighth Antichrist, this beastly king. And I think likely what we see here is these are the 10 world rulers who are on the stage at the time of the beast's appearance.
Yeah.
And that they are going to bend the knee and swear fealty to the satanic king. I also could see these being, I could see these being either references to sons of God.
Yes.
The Psalm 82, right? The watchers who have sinned against God. Or I could also see these as being Nephilim, who are in power in that day. Perhaps Nimrod is not the first of these Nephilim who reappears on this earth. Perhaps there are these 10 others. These 10 others recognize the second coming of the Antichrist as Satan's son and swear their fealty to Satan's son, and he unites them under this world empire. That to me is a very possible, again, speculating,
right,
but I think that's a very possible way that this would play out.
I could totally see that,
Ultimately, through the course of this, they will turn against the city of Babylon. And I think it's interesting that God's first great judgment against this future empire and this future economic superpower is actually civil war. Before the Son of God ever appears in the clouds, you have them literally ripping themselves apart. And it's a good reminder that even though the forces of evil are all against God, that doesn't necessarily mean they're allied with one another. And we see this often. We see this frequently in the Old Testament, where Israel will be opposed by a federation of foreign powers. And one of the ways that God will rescue his people is he will turn those powers against each other. And here we see these 10 kings going to war with the city of Babylon. And prior to God's final judgment, there is actually this sort of self-judgment of them ripping each other apart as they perhaps vie for power over who will be the dominant power.
No, absolutely. To the point where, like, from the inside out, even with the harlot, you know what I mean, ripping her to shreds. That yes, she was a common, you know what I mean, friend, but now is an enemy.
We're also going to get, and this kind of starts to get us into chapter 18, and then we get into chapter 19 and 20 in the millennium. But we're going to have some sort of continuation of the power of these 10 kings after their defeat and after after the prostitute is left desolate. Okay, so in verse 16, the second half, they will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with power. For God has put in their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. So her dominion is going to be broken, and yet these kings, these evil forces, are going to be there to witness, and in some degree will continue on after the destruction of Babylon. And perhaps that has implications for why the millennium exists and what is happening in the millennium period. So, anything else you want to talk about in regards to the beastly kings?
No, I think the only thing that I thought was interesting is how John says it twice, and which twice means witness, right? The testimony is that they are of one mind. And I think this is really interesting because I think about how as the family of God, even as the church, as brothers and sisters, and I go back to Acts, of that they were of one mind, of one commonality, of fellowshipping, devoted to the fellowship and of the breaking of bread. And I just think this is interesting of here we have this false son of God, these false followers And just like God's people should be of one mind, the enemy itself becomes of one mind, even for just a little while. And so this compare and contrast from the family of God versus the family of the enemy, the beast of Satan, these different qualities that come into play. And I just thought that was, really beautiful and interesting how John compares those things.
Well, good thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, we will pick it up next time. We'll be in chapter 18. And so this concludes our section here on chapter 17. Thank you so much for joining us, and can't wait to see you next time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Theology with Coffee.
If you have any questions, comments, or prayer requests, please reach out to us at theologywcoffee@gmail.com. Again, theologywcoffee@gmail.com.
We'll see you next time.
Bye!